Big Boss Jock Radio Show. Listeners are encouraged to rise up, revolt, confront the U.S. government, not allow the takeover, the formation of the autonomous region of California, the proclamation of sanctuary places. Don't allow the breakup of the U.S. territory. Liberate the Confederate States of America. The Alamo, placed as the capital. Analyst Assessment 21, Episode 21. Before we go any further on the assessment, you people out there, learn to be analysts, assessing the video, the Calexico Roundtable. It happened on April 5, 2019, when the video clip was posted by NBC News, entitled, "Watch Live, Trump Participates in Immigration and Border Security Roundtable." Airtime, 52 minutes, 2 seconds. There's a bit of an issue. A court case. Big Boss Jock is being charged with 2 felonies. It's been described in past episodes. One is for a partially covered knife. The attire partially covered the knife. 8-inch blade. Worn on hip, sheath on belt. 5 months on the doorstep of Redding, California Police Department. At their doorstep. At the intersection, on one of the main avenues in town, back, forth, at each change of the light. Anyone out there notice the knife? Maybe they would like to appear at the court. Let the judge know that that knife was being worn on that man's hip for month after month, day after day, Monday through Friday, every afternoon. In clear view, on the doorstep of the Redding Police Department. Yes, right. The other charge, and why that knife was being worn, why wasn't I arrested before? Why did it go on for 5 months? They recognize my status as a federal agent, placed at the U.S. Secret Service since 1988. Birth name, Earl Hawkins, U.S. federal agent. Auxiliary name, Jean Paul Martineau. Being charged as a felon indigent. Multitude of bullet wounds. No medical attention. And because I gave that a mention, they're going to humiliate me further and use those statements against me without checking into the identity at all. Nothing. Denied a habeas corpus hearing to establish identity, and they're going to proceed on a felony charge of giving false information to an official? Oh, there's something askew. Something wrong with the group. Oh, they wear blue. The police being allowed to torture. Every day out there with a sign. Straight pins inserted into eyeballs. My eyeballs. Pushed through my testicles. Inserted under fingernails. And everyone just finds this amusing. Denied any type of health care. Denied medical benefits. Earned. That's right. Denied. Not accredited in any way for any achievement. Robbed of my identity. Held a slave. I'd appreciate some assistance. Anyone out there who might have noticed that knife, I'd appreciate them appearing at the courthouse 8:30, May 23rd, 2019. Any federal agents out there? Maybe they could enter into the room and let the judge know. These pages aren't just from any person. They need to be in the agency, connected to the operations. And how could have that happened? Yeah, something's askew. Very wrong. Quoting information from 1972, exact locations. The location? Vietnam. First 5 years of my life. And they weren't at the base. Bases from I-Corps to 3-Corps. Oh, and further. Continuing with the analyst assessment. 4 minutes, 57 seconds. The statement of Dawn. With Mexico over the last 4 days has done more than they have ever done. We were talking about that before, Kevin. Kevin? I'm not sure if he's President Kevin or Commissioner Kevin. I think there's 2 Kevins, because I know there was a Commissioner mentioned. Or was he Brendan? And then there's President Kevin. And there's President Dawn. And they're on first name basis, everyone at the table. Speaking about the Calexico conference, they term a round table. Again, at 4 minutes and 57 seconds, which country has importance? Which country received name association? Again, Mexico. The United States of America, we, has done more they have ever done. We were talking. So in this case, they tricked the listener. We isn't the United States of America. It's he, Don, with Kevin, personally. But they temporarily associated as part of the group, we, the United States of America. .505. Statement Don made. They're apprehending people by the thousands and bringing them back to their countries, bringing them back to where they came from. Oh, you people. Bill and Bob took a trip. While on the visit, he fell. He was hurt. Who was hurt, Bill or Bob? Yep, keep rolling along. Uh-huh. Not even 3rd grade level. Confusing Spot and Sparky because they can't differentiate. Didn't follow up. It's obvious when there's 2 being described, they can't follow up with he if both of them are males. It's confusing. Something learned in elementary school grammar. How to present one's message on paper. Pen to the paper. Write an essay, begin writing sentences and group those together and it becomes an essay. First are the phrases. By the listeners taking note, paying attention to such dialogue, they reduce their intellect. And what is accomplished is they're brainwashed. That's the incentive of the computer-generated placed dialogue. Fabricated by the USDIA. It's their production. Fabrication? There we go. Fabricated, seeing as if they didn't do it. Well, who fabricated the lie? Yeah, that's right. That's them. They're right in line. The USDIA. 505. The people. This is the problem too. Statement made. Don. They're apprehending people by the thousands. Why is the self-proclaimed nationalist, why such an aversion of stating illegal migrants by the thousands? And then the listener knows that person was doing something illegal and that's why they were apprehended. Who else is being termed part of the people? The U.S. citizen. They're being grouped with the illegal migrant, associating to the term people. And it shouldn't have been there. Oh, how simplistic. The country of Mexico. So Mexico is doing more over the last 4 days than they have ever done. The big boss jock had the privilege to hitchhike, had no money, spent many a day on the side of the road in southern Mexico. He is quite familiar with migration along the Panamericana. They have a multitude of checks, a strict immigration policy. What Yankee U.S. citizen doesn't realize, for the most part, the group doesn't realize, Mexico has a stronger economy than its neighbors, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. If they didn't, and that's Mexico, enforce a strong immigration policy, they would be inundated with their neighbors seeking better employment. Mexico also has joint operation bases with the country of the United States of America. They have special agreements. That protocol has been breached due to the U.S. Congress signed into legislation. Any illegal migrant who chooses can use a mundane excuse such as domestic abuse or felt threatened by a gang member or a gang so they can stay, claim refugee status, that illegal migrant, gang member or the gang. So what they can do is show their identity card, show a newspaper article that gang violence occurred in their neighborhood. Well, they're a refugee. Well, how many in the United States of America would qualify for refugee status if they were allowed to use those reasons? Millions upon millions upon millions. Well, why don't they get a free lunch along with breakfast and dinner, included housing? And just so everything's okay, make sure they have their medical benefits and some money to boot so they don't feel as if they're impoverished. Oh yeah, they get checks, they get housing, they get medical. They're a refugee, someone who escaped a war zone, usually experienced a horrific situation unfold right before them, take away everything. There is a reason for refugee status, and it's existed for decades. The policies with Mexico have been in place for over a century. There has been no immigration crisis. Well, why would there be one now? Because the U.S. Congress made an open invitation. The allowance of mundane reasons for an excuse to receive refugee status. Not described on the mainstream media, the problem. The legislation. The leader of the country, with executive decree in a flash, as long as it takes for him to sign that piece of paper, could sign out of legislation the open invitation. In the U.S. Joint Operations bases, troops deployed. No one's going up that highway. They need to go through the jungles and the forests and across the hills and mountains. Trek the entire while off of the highway. And even those zones would be patrolled. Right there, Tapachula, over to Copan, the Mexican side, Mexico side. Well, I believe Copan, the border doesn't go across the ruins, though it's quite near. The town that's there, San Cristobal, but it's not exactly on the border. Yeah, I hitched it. I know. Hitchhike. Thumbing a ride. Spent an hour or two, and I know the situation. I was illegal also. Couldn't pay the $14 fee for the entrance visa at Guatemala. Didn't have an explanation how I arrived in Mexico without going through Guatemala, hitching a ride. 4 minutes, 57 seconds. Well, that's already been described with Mexico over the last 4 days. That's ridiculous. And 4 days, that term used is to give the viewer or the listener a misconception of time. 4 days means nothing. And comparing that to, well, it could. But in this case, comparing it to immigration policy, which has existed for decades and decades, over a century, the similar policies in place with Mexico. Mexico has done, well, how would it be described? Not great. Donald, he greats. And is it tremendous? Well, they've done an efficient job, Mexico, at curbing illegal migration. All the way until they were no longer allowed to halt the illegal migrant. They were ordered, instructed by the Yankee Empire to let them pass, those illegal migrants. They're asylum seekers, seeking refugee status in the Yankee Empire. Go ahead, pass through the territory. They don't want to look bad in front of the world, halting asylum seekers who are fleeing horrific circumstances. What's the definition of a refugee? Someone who experienced domestic abuse? No. The definition is someone who most usually experienced warlike conditions. War was brought to their territory, and usually by colonial powers, meaning the country of the USA with its empire building around the world, has destroyed many an infrastructure and many a town and city, created the need for people to go seek safety other places. Crisis situations were what were produced by Yankees' conquest, empire building. They didn't concentrate on their infrastructure. Oh, they did underground. Speaking about Yankee. Above ground, the money was invested underground. Neglected. The people are going to be ushered to the underground when occurs the crisis situations. The knock and take, confiscation of guns, going to happen as soon as Donald declares, just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. No more money. Bankrupt. Had to cede the territory. It won't matter anyways. Will be explained underground because they'll be allowed to go back to their residences one day and rebuild, and they'll be given compensation checks. Allotments. 90 million can be accommodated in the underground. Entire cities. One thing that doesn't occur is the tunnel system is not underground from coast to coast. The Rocky Mountains, strategic, divides the continent. They didn't take the time nor use the funds, which would have been exorbitant, to drill through the continental shelf. They decided it was more feasible, favored their plan better by traveling above ground and not investing that money into drilling further into the continental shelf. 505. They're apprehending people by the thousands and bringing them back to their countries, bringing them back to where they came from. Bill and Bob, who tripped? He did. There's 2 days. It's to make confusion. Statement made, Don, and I think, that's a 511. Statement made, Don, and I think you see that. That's at their southern border, and that's a big difference. That'll help us, pretty much 90%, 80%. And do you think, fellas, close right? Go ahead, take the pen to the paper and write it down themselves. Now that they understand, and that's the words of Don, But they're not. And what's going on is computer generation. The statements are not genuine. They're being chumped through the use of you. That's you, listener. Being the chump. Declaring the president number one. Every time they use the PSYOP's name given to the president. Trump. The one that beats all other cards in the card game. Number one, number one. The one that's going to take everything away. Take a dive. All planned. He's not going to be there at the end. Some will see him as a martyr. Someone to be revered. The statue of Paul Revere without the head on, and Don's head is on the statue. The figurine inside the office. The PSYOPs photos. The listeners observe again and again, over again. Conditioned. Another group, they'll despise Don because the USA will be gone. And they'll be in detainment in the underground. Due to the crisis situation, it won't be termed that way. It'll be termed temporary housing. What they don't realize, such as at the metro stops, on the main metros in the United States of America, many have mesh that rise from the floor and connect with the roof. Well, there's their confine, and they can do them all the way down to boxes for the dogs. Oh, well, no, that's the human, and they're included. That's right. Detainment. The mini-mart turns into the commissary. Line up! Wednesday! And, well, chow time! 3 times a day. And due to the crisis situation, they can sign up, get out of their confined area, and make license plates at 7, maybe license tags for the underground, whatever's necessary at 7 cents an hour. But, I mean, it goes a long ways at the commissary. It's at a good rate. Not so much profit made. They do get a tax write-off. Almost at cost? No, double. It's commissary. Someone needs to make a profit. The provider. Private. It's all about money. The profits. Them in control, filling their coffers more. Further. Hoarding everything. The worth, the value of the nation. The role. They've invested extensively in an underground network all around the world. Under Europe, under Asia, Russia. What they're going to realize, they're not separate entities. USDIA operators, one after another. The leader of China wears a mask, such as Don, can peel that off. And that's another underneath. He has Caucasian parents. They passed away. Analyst assessment. That's it for episode 21. The one only God, He helps me do this rhyme, line by line. I do give my thanks, along with gratitude, for our Father in heaven, our one only God. This is the Big Boss Jock, momentarily signing off.